Hello, Brian.
Welcome to Dagger Cast, the Pride edition of Dagger Cast.
Pride edition!
Well, we're always proud. Always, but we're even prouder tonight because we have an amazing guest with us. But before we do that, I'm Brian, and this is Lindsay.
Hey, Brian.
Hey.
I would have been wearing my rainbow flag, but it is out prominently in my front yard,
Nice.
hanging. So I am really happy that we're doing this this week because for some stupid reason Jill Biden decided to reveal a Nancy Reagan stamp on Pride Month, which what the hell. So I'm really glad we're having this guest. Please do feel free to, the most about him, and I only know from what you've given me, and he sounds absolutely amazing. I'm very excited.
Yay. As we all should be.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I did. I totally needed to bring up hello Daggercast people that are there inside of the YouTube video. You should. If you want to talk to us, please feel free to email daggercastinfo@gmail.com. A lot of you have been giving me like really good suggestions of movies that we should talk about, that we should look at specifically for kind of, what we normally talk about. And of course, the best way to find us now is on YouTube because you can see us in video and in sound. And we're happy to have you if this is your first, second, or third. And that's basically it. Awesome. Please, let's get him here.
Get going. Our guest tonight is the amazing Owen Keehnen, a writer, actor, occasionally actor, a historian, gay historian, has been involved in the movement since the days of ACT UP, has written so many amazing books, including Doorway Unto Darkness, a look at a serial killer, which has gotten amazing reviews. He's an ultra Karen Black fan, so hopefully we'll talk about that. And just the amount of knowledge he has about the Chicago LGBTQIA history is overwhelming, and I'm so excited to welcome him and to talk about some of his current projects. So happy Pride all, and Mr. Owen Keehnen, come on in, my man. Yay.
Come on down. Oh, I think we got it. Yay!
A dramatic pause. We love a dramatic pause. Even when you're not a dog, you love a dramatic pause.
Yeah, even in a Zoom meeting, you really have to time your entrance. It's everything.
We're all learning, right? It's just we've had 3 years to perfect it.
And here we are, Pride Month. We're screaming with pride.
Yay!
I like that.
That was a prideful scream.
So talk about screaming. I think before we get into your interesting path, as it were, I think there's something we should always be proud of, and that's our love for Karen Black.
Oh my gosh.
So
I always think of it as, for me it's like Karen Black, Adrienne Barbeau, and Lynda Day George.
Oh my God!
I
love that you mentioned Lynda Day George. She is one of my favorites as well.
What was Lynda Day George in? I know what Karen Black was in, but what is Lynda Day George known for?
Ants, Day of the Animals, Pieces. What else am I missing?
Ants, Beyond Evil, Mortuary.
That's right.
It was a lot of sort of 80s drive-in stuff. That was so much fun.
Now, Lindsay, do you have a favorite Karen Black, or is that like an odd question to ask?
It's new to me. She's like kind of been one of those characters that I've seen in movies, and I've just been like, oh, that's Karen Black. That's who they're talking about. Like, I haven't really noticed because she's a chameleon, because she just does it. Like, and that's what I like about her. I was looking at her like wide swath of films, and she really is like big or small. She don't care. I also noticed that she doesn't necessarily call her movies horror movies when they are horror. She calls them like fantasy or like science
fantasy. I think was
science fantasy. I really liked that. I was like, good for you. Good for you.
My favorite was she did an out and out slasher flick. Do you remember Out of the Dark, Owen, about the sex work, the phone sex workers getting killed by someone in a clown mask?
Yes.
And she called that on a talk show a throwback to old school film noir. Which
you gotta love it.
Yeah. So I think in Pride Month we should always have pride in Karen Black, Adrienne Barbeau, and Lynda Day George. I think it's the first rule of Pride Month from now on.
Oh yeah, there was a Karen Black movie I saw in her repertoire recently that I was talking to you about, Brian, earlier, called Ooga Booga, which I was like, oh no. Like, I think they meant it to be like, like a black man dies, like, wrongfully. And it's him like coming back, but he comes back as like a very African doll. And I was like, like,
I'm sure that was a throwback to Trilogy of Terror, right? Well, like, I'm sure that's what it was.
Yeah.
So, sure, but it was just kind of funny how I was like, I don't like.
Yeah, no, it's not politically. It doesn't. At the very least, it does not sound or look politically correct.
Yeah, from the trailer alone, I was like, I'm gonna not watch that. But I was like, hey, they tried. Somebody tried.
Somebody did. Owen, on to I guess real life, and I guess a real life horror was obviously the AIDS crisis in the early 80s, and
we're diving right in.
You were yeah, let's do it, but because you've been posting so much lately about the legends you've kind of worked with in ACT UP, like Daniel Sotomayor and Scott McPherson and all these, Laurie Cannon, all these amazing people. What was how can you just tell us a little about that time period, how you got involved, et cetera, et cetera?
I basically got involved in all that because I had to do something. I mean, I just literally, from my own sanity, had to do something. And I tried a few different organizations, and I really liked ACT UP because I've always been very drawn to sort of hands-on activism. I liked that part of it. And from there, I mean, I think more from a history point of view, my activism is more trying to reclaim LGBTQ history. That's really, I think, where my activism is more like seeing the importance of our history and how we've just sort of been erased for, hundreds of years, all our accomplishments and just removed from history. So reclaiming that has been very big.
And if anyone who follows any of your feeds, that's obvious. I'm so curious about some of the legendary drag personas that you've been written about or talking about. The Bearded Lady from Dugan's Bistro, and then Tillie the Dirty Lady. I think there's such parts. I mean, this is the era of Drag Race and RuPaul, but there are all these kind of unheralded, entertainers and just amazing lights that you're trying to highlight. So,
well, thank you. I think a lot of it is with so much of that history is with the history of our bars, or the history with the bathhouses, or the history with the Belmont rocks, or anything like that. All the history is really fragile, meaning it's mainly contained in people's memories and things like that. The way a certain bar looked, and what night was movie night there, and what happened there isn't headline news. But a lot of things like that are really important moments and parts of a person's life. It's sort of teaching history, I think, really resonates when you can connect in sort of that level with people, maybe saying, this is how people were having fun, this is how they were hooking up, this is what they did this way. I think that part of history is really relatable sometimes compared to sort of like a great piece of legislation getting passed, which is very important. But I think for a lot of the person's average experience, maybe it's not as relatable.
It's also very important to me, I think, for historians like you to keep doing what you're doing, because I think a lot of people in power would rather forget a lot of the parts of this. You know what I mean? And I didn't know anything about the Belmont rocks until I looked at your Instagram and saw like all these men having a good time, like, and the one set of photos where the guy was getting arrested in his Speedo, like, and wait, I'm sorry, what?
He was arrested. You know, did you see there were like, I think 2 motorcycles and maybe 3 cars?
Oh yeah, and he was like, he was arrested for selling a sandwich, like illegal selling of a sandwich.
Like, you know, like, hey everybody at the Rocks, would you like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for $2? And had like a basket for them, but he was selling the sandwiches without a license.
It's ridiculous. But yeah, it was, I don't know, there's things like that where I was like, I didn't know about that. That's crazy. Like, Chicago's a big city, and it's just amazing that you're capturing this like section that, you know, I mean, I lived in Chicago for 14 years, and I just didn't even get this kind of documentation. And it's just great that you're still doing it, and you're doing it on platforms that are, you know, you're still finding ways to do them on modern platforms like Instagram, and obviously the reader is listening, and also like highlighting your work as well. So it's great, and it's so necessary.
Can you?
Well, and a lot of with the Instagram is, I think I really like the fact of having it free. I mean, that's the thing. You want like young people to be interested. And the good thing about Instagram is it's such like a digestible piece, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's kind of why I stay. That's why I stick around. Yeah. It's just, for me, it's like, it's even better than Facebook. Facebook is like where people like ask, you know, I lost my dog, can you find him? Crap. Or like, you know, my mom being like, oh, look at this picture from a year ago. But I like Instagram because it's just photos, you know, and it's like you're absorbing a lot using the image first and the caption later. And I feel like your pictures really, there's a lot to take in. There's like parts of Chicago I'm seeing that, you know, I stood on that street and it looks completely different because it was the 70s. Like it's really cool.
Well, and I like it too because so much of this history, a lot of times when AIDS hit, I think the parts of this history that maybe would have been documented more heavily, I think so many people were lost that this history had a really, was really at risk of being lost, you know?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. You were losing, you know, just kind, I mean, so much worse. Like what, in the last 3 years we've lost like 1 million people, but it was just so much worse back then. It was so shocking, it was so fast that, yeah, you were losing a lot of people's stories just because they were not alive anymore, like so rapidly.
And we didn't have the cell phones on us to take the pictures and to record videos and to do all that stuff back then, you know. So that's an amazing way. I've never really thought about that when I'm snapping my photos or doing my stuff on my cell phone, that the cell phone is a history maker, like a history preserver, you know, or can be, you know. You know, you always get angry when you see people like, you know, walking in traffic looking at their phones, but that's an amazing way to look at it as well.
It's a tool now.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Just more like, I don't know, I was just talking more about cell phones, the fact that they are just, you know, in our time of activism right now, you know, there are a lot of times where, you know, activists will say like, don't bring your phones, they're going to track you. But like also, having the ability to document wrongdoings right in front of you, police brutality, stuff like that. Like, we're seeing a lot of cell phone footage of cops doing really crappy shit, which has been really helpful. Also, I have a 2-year-old, and she already knows what a phone is. She already knows how to operate it. It ain't going away. And hopefully, like, the future generations are just going to be so much better with them. It's going to be wild.
Can we go back a bit on, like, and pretend like use you as our cell phone? Is there a night you remember, with Lori Cannon and Daniel Sotomayor and that group? Is there a specific night you remember that you could kind of show us or visualize us during those days of anger and gathering and all that kind of stuff?
See, a lot of times this is a completely different story. But I remember a Memorial Day picnic at Danny Sotomayor's and Scott McPherson's place. And that's like a memory I really liked, because it was such a fun day, and Lori was there. And I remember Danny was in a good mood because he was showing us George, his parrot, and who was terrifying, but Danny loved that. He would put this. Anyway, I like the time capsule, sort of like a nice memory, and that's one of the things. Tying back to something earlier, one of the things I really like about having the AIDS garden at the Belmont Rocks. Is that, or the area that was the Belmont Rocks, is that it highlights kind of those nicer memories. Like, when I remembered the Belmont Rocks, I remember like being out in the sun and hanging out with friends and, flirting. And it was a good time, or a cookout or whatever. And I'm just so happy that that's sort of the focal point of all this, when dealing with something like AIDS, because it highlights like a place where there were like the good times in the midst of those bad times, so
nice.
Anyway, but back to the memory thing. So I like to sort of, there are memories, but those are the ones I tend to sort of gravitate more towards.
Of course, the beautiful ones. And just, I sometimes think that we as hosts don't always, like, we'll ask a question. Just for those out there listening, Daniel Sotomayor was one of the first big LGBTQIA cartoonists and columnists, huge age activist, just amazing work. And his partner was Scott McPherson, who wrote Marvin's Room, which of course is one of the best known, most brilliantly constructed pieces of theater out there that was made into a movie. And Lori Cannon, who I also mentioned, was one of the big kind of founders here in Chicago behind ACT UP. So those are the people I've been asking about and that Owen's been talking about. I think sometimes we dive into it and I'm like, maybe they don't know who the hell we're talking about. I don't know. So.
I didn't mean it like that. I just meant it was more like, a lot of times with the activism stuff, the mood was more like, the mood was just like, angrier and stuff.
Yeah.
The reason I preferred that memory is just, it was like a relaxing day.
No.
Like nothing was going on.
Yeah.
More like.
I got that. I was just kind of backtracking and letting the people listening, just in case they didn't know who we were talking about, just kind of giving them some history. No, I totally got. I think we all got why you wanted to share that memory, because it was a happy time.
I just wanted you to think that you thought that. Anyway.
No. I was just explaining for the audience, Tell us a little bit about one of the people I've been fascinated about that you've been writing about is Tillie the Dirty Lady. Can we give a little history on her?
Tillie the dirty old lady came to Chicago probably in I believe it's the early 60s, and started working at this place called the My Oh My. And Tillie would like doing things like she'd do Sophie Tucker, and she would do yeah, things like that. She would do very, very big, very Ethel Merman stuff like that. But she would, when Tillie moved here, this was her first performing job and didn't realize that you were lip syncing. So Tillie would actually be yelling like louder, trying to sing louder than the music that was accompanying her. But anyway, Tillie eventually went to work at a place called the Chesterfield, which was probably in the it was in the mid 1960s, but it was like a Diversey and Clark. And then for a while managed the stage show at a drag bar up at Foster and Sheridan called Sparrows. And Tillie was just around forever. And just a wonderful character, always dressed in the most like brilliant outfits, went out as Tillie, and lots of jewelry, lots of sparkles, lots of spangles.
No, Tillie looks like a classy ass lady. Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't going anywhere with that, other than the fact that she was a classy ass lady. She is. She's like dripping with jewelry, lots of fur, big old hats. Yeah, she definitely looks like she doesn't look dirty, which is funny. Like, like she doesn't look like you'd look at her and be like, oh no, dirty stuff's about to happen.
No.
In your research, have you found the bearded lady who you have a book out about? Do you think there's a lot of similarities between the two, or are there a lot of differences in their drag that you've discovered? As you
in their drag, I think a lot of it is very different. I think Tillie was kind of at an earlier age. I think the bearded lady's more like a gay liberation kind of. It always gave me more like a flower child kind of drag feel to it, in that was more like a performance thing, where the bearded ladies thing was more like dressing in layers of clothes, and as the song would play, like shedding all these layers until they were wearing, like a one-piece woman's bathing suit. But just the sort of theatrical nature of it all. I always think of the bearded lady as kind of a little more, like much more maybe performance art.
Awesome.
Because it was very much about audience adoration, and the fact that the audience loved the bearded lady for the bearded lady's imperfections, like the fact that they might not know the words to the song they were lip syncing, or that they were sweating a whole bunch. Like all these things only enhance the crowd's love of the bearded lady. So it was sort of like the bearded lady was sort of like going up there and saying, "I'm fabulous, here I am," is kind of what the message I got from that.
Nice.
Yeah, how are you enjoying like it's funny because I feel like I completely understand kind of like back in the day, that's kind of how the bearded lady was seen. Not necessarily like even like bearded lady, if we're like normal like circus time bearded lady, they also were always dressed very beautifully, but there's this beard, and it was just like, what, a woman with a beard, like how silly. But like now we're seeing drag queens with beards, and they are not shaving them, and it's not necessarily like, yeah, it's like they're not like saying the words wrong or sweating profusely. They're looking just as good as other drag queens, and just kind of saying like, sorry guys, the beard stays on.
Bearded lady was though too. The bearded lady was just a man with a beard who dressed in women's clothing. So it was kind of like a gender thing too, that was just I don't know. It was a lot about makeup too, and like hair pieces, and just it was all very costumey.
Did you see the Bearded Lady and Tillie perform, or is this all stuff that you have just gathered through other people's remembrances?
No, I never saw the Bearded Lady perform, and I knew Tillie from around, but had never seen Tillie perform, and probably knew the Bearded Lady from around too, but never saw the Bearded Lady perform. But later, when the Bearded Lady sort of was back here in the like the 90s, sort of, that's probably when. So already not a performer really anymore.
And you have a book out, correct, about the Bearded Lady that's available?
Oh, it's called Dugan's Bistro and the Legend of the Bearded Lady. And it's all about the downtown glitter disco scene in Chicago in the 1970s.
And that's not really there anymore, correct? That there's maybe the upstairs bar, correct? Is that the only one that's in downtown Chicago now?
Yeah.
And
it's not. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you're fine. Go.
In your research, we were talking about the different clubs, or just in your, as you went about your life as a gay man. Is there a place that is no longer around that you think that this current generation would have adored, and really gotten into?
There's a few different things that I think, you know what, I don't know if I think this generation would actually adore it, okay. But I think it's interesting for this generation to think about, because sometimes I think younger gay people think that, like, older gay people, that our basic thing was to, we all wanted to get married, have children, and join the army. And a lot of times the parts of history that I like to focus on are when those things were kind of like, we wanted to build not we as in I was around, but I mean we as in like the larger LGBTQ community wanted to build, like, we wanted to try to do something better, I think. We wanted, I think, maybe try to build a different mold. So I think sometimes with telling history, you can show that, like, the way history is remembered isn't always the way it's kind of happening at the time, or did happen at the time. And that's something...
Or even how it felt at the time.
Or how it felt at the time. Or what brought it about. I mean, a lot of times, these things came about because of AIDS too. I mean, the great thing about marriage is you have a lot of rights that you don't have if you're not married, which became very important with AIDS. Same with, children and custody and things like that. I mean, I think family became maybe more important. Anyway, I'm sorry, could you scratch that last part? I don't even know what I'm talking about. Sorry.
I thought it was fascinating.
I thought so too. I kind of understand what you mean. Like, you're right. I think a lot of times, heteronormative, cisgendered people run our country and the world. So they're like, well, isn't this what you want? You want this, this, and this. But really, like, I think a lot of times people on the fringe don't necessarily want exactly what the white male person wants. We just have to we just have to play the game. We have to play by their rules because they made the rules. So I kind of understand what you mean in the sense that, like, it wasn't necessarily like, yeah, that you wanted to, like, get married and join the army. Like, you just wanted to live.
Yeah,
and you wanted to live in America with the same rights as any freaking other person. And sometimes you just kind of have to put on an amount of values that you're like, wait a minute, these are kind of obsolete and I kind of don't care about them. But
well,
kind of.
Go on.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm. At least that's what I was taking you to mean, which is very. That is definitely something to think about, you know, and I really think, yeah, it is funny how history kind of, you know, sometimes just the largest thing gets like the AIDS crisis that gets really highlighted because that was a big part of the LGBTQ movement in general. Because a lot of them were dying at that time, and the government was literally just looking the other way. But it wasn't always just that you wanted, you know, representation for. You wanted everything else too. So it's just kind of like, yeah, it is funny what history focuses on, and yeah, it's really nice to point at even that, you know, to point at how we look at history.
I just read When We Rise by Cleve Jones, and one of the things that really struck me, and I think kind of plays back into what you were just saying, Owen, is that his analysis kind of the gay community is that there are those who think that we are totally like everyone else, except that we sleep with men or women, you know.
Yeah.
And that there's the other side of the gay community who thinks that we are totally different from the rest of society, and the only thing that makes us the same is that we mate and that we have, you know, we find partners and things like that. And I think that kind of is what you were saying, that the younger community thought we just wanted to live like these normal lives, but I think there was so much radical thought and radical action, things that we wanted, you know, in the 60s and 70s that had nothing to do with marriage or being like anyone else, and we didn't think we were like a straight society.
People wanted to get laid without getting hassled.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of, they wanted to drink, have fun with their friends, and get, you know, I don't think like there was a big game and plan. I think just people were just wanted to just be able to not always be on the lookout.
Yeah.
But going back to the things wanted, I think this all is more, for me, I look at it as more like a marketing tool, meaning that once you become a consumer market, I think like you have to narrow the focus. Like you can't provide, you know, products and services for a wide range of people. But if you get everybody to kind of want a narrower path, you've got your market. You know, and I don't like to be that cynical, but sometimes it sort of feels like that, you know.
Especially this month, which kind of sucks because it's Pride Month. And I do feel like oftentimes corporations are just constantly like, hey, gay, do you want gay? Like, we put rainbow on it. Yeah. Don't you love? Like, yeah. And it sucks. But yeah. And even like kind of going back to like what we're talking about, like what people want, like in the 60s and 70s, not even straight people wanted the lives that they had, you know, like a lot of them. I mean, that's why. And they were all seen as mentally ill or weird because they didn't want to live the normal, you know, 2 kids in a suburban house, car, and whatever. Like, and now I feel like, I mean, at least luckily, I feel like we're in a world now where that's more acceptable. And I think because of that, gay people are more acceptable because not everybody fits in that little bucket anymore.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a really good point.
Yeah,
definitely agree with that.
And what were some of those places that you think you found that no longer exist, where you found that freedom and that joy and that otherness?
Two places I'm really working on doing a lot about right now are the Belmont Rocks.
Okay.
Which we've talked about, and that was sort of a place for everybody. And I've been working lately on something about man's country. I really think that like a great bathhouse that was around for 45 years and had stood through so much, I think using place and setting is a really interesting way to tell history. Because sometimes if you get like basically the stage set, then you can tell the story. A lot of times if you're telling the person's story, it's harder if you keep changing things. At least for me, I find like it's easier for me to tell history with a contained space.
Definitely. Well, yeah, there's so much that went on in the bathhouse culture, from entertainment to people finding themselves. And I've read stories of people who in a bathhouse who met the dude and screwed him, and then they went home and spent 50 years together. Which I think is uncommon, but that there's so many amazing things that have happened in the bathhouses. So.
And from a perspective, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna pop in here. Just from a perspective of someone who's never been in a bathhouse, nor would have any business being in a bathhouse. I enjoy it because then I'm getting a perspective that I would not be getting otherwise, and it is very fun and like exciting to hear about this stuff. But also, I think a lot of people see these things and they go, "Oh, a bathhouse, that scares me." Like that's a creepy, I would never go there, so I'm scared of it. But it's like, for me, it's more like I don't get to experience that the way you guys do. Like, tell me all about it, like, I don't know. I'm sorry.
Well, and that's one of the misconceptions about bathhouse culture too, is a lot of times it's seen as just like a place for sex, which some bathhouses are. But Man's Country also was a huge place for talent when they came into town. It was so popular that like when the bars would close, if you were out with a bunch of friends at a bar and it was closing time at 4:00 and you felt like keeping the party going, people just went to Man's Country. People would go there for the weekend. They'd bring like love beads and they'd bring like their own pillows. Man's Country had stores in it at different times. It had a country store. It had a store, the erogenous zones. Waylon Flowers and Madam were here, and Charles Pierce were here and played here, and just so many wild acts. It's just like there's such a rich history to me. And the thing I love about it too is I really want to bring this kind of history and bar history a lot of times to life, because going along with what we were saying about sort of that of history, sort of that channeling of it, this is it so bugs me when I see LGBT history, and especially gay history, when it's made very sort of, not sterile, but it just doesn't get the feel of what sexual liberation was. I mean, this was like a big party that lasted a long time. It wasn't like people out being promiscuous. No, going out, and it was a political act. You were going out and doing something you couldn't do. You were being known. You were being empowered by doing this because you were doing it on your own terms, and you weren't getting busted, ideally, anymore. So I think a lot of just we look at maybe promiscuity, which is a word I even, just saying that, I feel like it's
yeah, it's almost like promiscuous implies that it's a bad thing.
Yeah. And truthfully,
exactly.
Anything to worry about except getting like a shot of penicillin, in those days, and you just were out and were like, I want to have like all the incredible sex and ecstasy in the next 5 years, and you could do it at that, at that time in the economy by working like a waiter job. Why not?
I know that.
I know I spent my younger years doing like some stuff I didn't like. I would have loved to have spent it doing stuff I completely liked if they were, or different when I was that age, And I just, when it comes to history, I really resent the fact of like gay history being seen as like that's kind of a bad thing to admit. It was like, not a bad thing, but you know what I mean? It still kind of has a judgment to it, to just say, like, there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you want to do, go for it.
Yeah, by the time I started having sex, AIDS was already a reality. So I did have that view of the bathhouses like equal death, and it was irresponsible. But I had worked a corporate job, was doing my theater thing. The company closed down. I had like a little bit of money, and I was like, I want to go out and have an adventure. And I wound up in the mid 90s working for about 6 months at Man's Country, and it terrified me at first. But it was probably the sweetest, most it opened my eyes. It opened my humanity. I mean, because everyone there, from the toughest leather daddy who would go in and fist someone and come out and have to wash his hands, in the bathroom, and was the sweetest, nicest, kindest, it undemonized so much for me, and it was such a lesson in humanity for me, like in a good way. And whenever I would go back to Man's Country, I would, throughout the 10 or 15 years that it was around after I stopped working there, I just had this feeling of just tenderness and love, and just, it really just opened my mind up and my heart up, and made me such a better person, like to be around all these different types of people with their different kinks and their different wants, and they were all almost to a T, some of the nicest, kindest, funniest, most interesting people I've met. So it was such a revelation, and I do think I will talk to gay men younger than I am, and they'll be like, bathhouses? Oh, I would never do that. And I was like, oh, whatever, dude. It ain't what you think,
Well, it isn't like, now it's hard to imagine, because now it's very much like a sexual place. But I mean, truthfully, as you study this, and I mean, as you look at it more, it's amazing how much community went on there. I mean, so much of gay men's health was claimed at Man's Country, with VD testing, and sending a VD van out to bars to try to get people tested for STDs and hepatitis. And
that was going on when I worked there. There was like one night a week there would be someone from Stop AIDS or whatever, testing people, and I worked a couple leather conventions like on my off hours where same thing, just and those are mixed crowds. I mean, you'd have straight women, coming in their latex.
I've been to IML.
Yeah, but they would actually do little conventions at Man's Country.
Really, that's awesome.
Yeah, no. So and just I would, I worked the snack shop for 6 or 7 months or however long, and they would just come and talk with me, and
you would be the cutest snack shopper. Come on now.
So I mean, I definitely, I don't think it's there then, but thankfully I got at the tail end of that sense of community when I did my stint at MC. So.
Well, part of it too with doing this is, now that Man's Country is gone, this is like, it was such an important part of history, and the longer it sort of sits there, the more of it goes away. So I really wanted to put something together that sort of captured it, and its importance, and the fact that it could be seen as something that tried to basically build an argument, that I'm not really arguing. I mean, it's just stuff that was true at the time, in how it was more than just a bathhouse, that it.
Yeah, and I've knowing gay people in my life, personally, some of my very best friends are gay. We have talked about this a lot, where we have said, well, back, there was a point in time where it was illegal to be gay. There was a time where your parents would literally think they had to kick you out. And there were places I feel like a lot of just LGBTQ people we're looking constantly for community. And
oh yeah,
and so it's like finding it in a bathhouse, like that's wonderful. But also, I think a lot of people on the outside of it looked at it and was like, "Wait, you're doing what there? You're doing what at a public what?" Like, and I think a lot of times people just don't understand that there was nowhere else to go. Like you were literally like you were ostracized from pretty much most of society, from your own family. You had the same needs and wants as any normal red-blooded American. You were horny just like every other person. Like, and if you needed to go to a place to find all of this stuff like that, I'm so happy that was there for those people. I feel like now, because we have parents that are a little more supportive of their gay children, or like or trans, like, like now we're seeing like more parents like really actually helping people, like their sons and daughters along the way. um but there are still trans kids out there that are homeless, that are getting murdered. Like, they need community too, and it's like we like, I feel, it I'm like, sorry that it happened in a bathhouse, but it did. And it's very important to keep that history and to know, like, hey, back in the day, this is where we went. And
well,
I'm sorry. I don't know where else I was going.
part of it is too that I think with some place like Man's Country, and I think with like, any bar, any place like that, that's where so much of community is built. That's where we socialize, at places like that, the bars and the Belmont Rocks. And the thing that makes me so sad is that those pieces are sort of the foundation of our society, or our community, I mean.
Yeah.
But those foundations are the same things that we don't like really pay attention to when they go away.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think we don't realize how truly important queer space was, and queer space cannot be duplicated in the cyber world. I'm sorry. I think you need an actual, like, people together sort of situation. I think, online can be a good substitute, but like certain places, I think really help. Now they're doing a lot of community centers and things, which is great.
Do you think?
Because people need that community.
It's true, and in COVID, that's why we're seeing kind of like the stress. We're all seeing our stress because we've had to look to online communities in order to like keep our sanity, and that's not cutting it for a lot of people still. So yeah, I agree. You can't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. And back in the day, these community spaces were so much more precious, and now there's a lot. And I think they take advantage of the fact that there are a lot of community spaces for LGBTQ people, like, but back in the day, like, they were a dime a dozen and you had to hold on to them. So yeah, they deserve their due.
Do you think, speaking of queer space and queer, recognition, do you think, Owen, that in the films you've seen lately, kind of tying this back into horror, that people are doing better, like filmmakers are doing better? Do you think the queer community is getting represented, the Latin community, the Black community? Do you think our minorities are being better represented in film?
Yes, better, yes, because they are being represented. I mean, so much of what, like, the movies I remember, the horror movies I remember going up to, I mean, it just, that there was no diversity really. Or if there was, it was really measured diversity, I'd say.
Yeah. That
was character's defining characteristic or something like that,
Measured was a good word. I liked that.
Yeah,
Measured.
No, me too, because you could have, Don't Go in the House, which was a grindhouse 80s film from New York, really, not nice to women. But they had a queer character, and he was the flamboyant shop person, who outfits the flame torching serial killer, so he can go out and flame torch some more, poor unsuspecting ladies, So there were the fashion designers in Blackula who were just blatantly gay, who get offed by Blackula in the first moment. So I love that description as measured as well, because it kind of kept us in our place, effeminate, flamboyant, disposable, for most parts. So yeah.
Always the first to die.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. And I find I get angry now. I just watched, I was yelling at the television at John Krasinski the other day, because I was like, fuck you, Krasinski, fuck you. You've got all this money and a beautiful wife. But in A Quiet Place 2, granted, the heroine is a young deaf woman, which is amazing. There's one semi-major Black character who gets killed off like he's on screen for maybe 10 minutes, gets killed off. The guy who shows up, who's the best friend, or kind of helps the family, he could have been Asian or Black or whatever. Like, you've got all this money, all this power. A Quiet Place is one of the breakout hits of the last 5 years or so, and you could have done so much, and it wouldn't have changed the story, but you could have brought so much diversity. Granted, I'm sure there are people who are going to argue, as I said, that the young heroine is a deaf woman, which I think is amazing. But why take half a step when you could run a mile and really have made that film so diverse?
Yeah, it sucks because that film doesn't have that many characters to begin with, because it's basically like they're all, it's such a bleak apocalyptic setting. But yeah, you're right. I do remember that, and I remember being very like,
yeah, and I think that's good that we're feeling that way, because I think other films are giving us, leading characters who are gay, leading characters who are Black, leading characters who are Asian. So that stuff is really noticeable now when it's not.
Yeah, I just recently started watching Stranger Things, the 4th season, and it's actually for diversity. I think it's better than the 80s. I'm sorry. Yeah. They try, they really do. But there's a lesbian character who's cute because she's best friend. She's like really close friends with the womanizer teen of the group, who's always dating girls. But now she's there, and she's also like kind of talking about her, and she's a lot, whereas the guy can be really boisterous about it, she's very like quiet about it because she doesn't want anyone to know, obviously, because she's gay. It's ridiculous. But like, I'm glad they've added that in. Also, the lesbian is Maya Hawke, who is Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke's child, and boy does she look like it. She looks like a young Uma. It's wild. But yeah, that, and then there's like characters of color. But yeah, it's interesting now that they're kind of adding like queer characters more, like in horror, like the whole Fear Street thing that they did on Netflix. That was a little bit more like they had a couple more queer characters. Question, Owen, that we ask a lot of our guests. Are you into seeing like more gays in horror that are like killed off, or not? Like, does it make you feel crappy, or do you think, yeah, more representation of because we the last Halloween had a gay couple get slashed? Yeah, like what are your thoughts?
Okay, my take on it is, if they have more and more LGBTQ characters in horror films, that's great. But do not insult LGBTQ people by having that be like all the character is. Mm-hmm. Like, that drives me nuts. You know, it's like I don't know, like the film heroine's gay best friend. Like he has no, like you never remember his name. He's kind of like her friend. You know, you're defined by sort of kind of what you are rather than who you are. So I think for me, I wouldn't mind if they get killed off or whatever. Just make them somebody interesting. You know, don't make it somebody who just has nothing going for them except the fact that, you know,
that they will be killed.
Or they're just like, sometimes it can be the, you know, well, not so much anymore, but it used to be, I'd always be, whenever a gay character was introduced, I would never like it because I would be on edge, because I would just be ready for just, you knew something was coming. You know, you knew it was going to be an issue in some, like, I don't know, either insulting or some way. So when it's done poorly, I just assume even if, like, when it's that way, I don't even want to see a gay character if they're going to be done in a way that just, I don't know, insults everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, why bother?
I know that there was. Have you seen Halloween Kills?
No, I have not.
Okay.
No, I have not, and I should. I just.
Yeah.
I probably can imagine
it. But they have these characters, Big John and Little John, names that are impossible to forget because they're so kind of simplistic. I kind of dug them. It's the gay couple, but you know, one of them is smoking his joint and listening to his weird music, and you know, I thought there were stereotypical things about them, but there was enough that there were enough little bits of layers, and that I could see, like, my oldest gay friend, kind of like my big brother, is like this hippie dude who's smoking all the time and listens to his music and loves his patio. So I could see him in those characters, and they do, as everyone knows, probably even without seeing the film, do get killed off. But I kind of thought the stereotype is true sometimes. You know, they obviously had a little money. They came into the, you know, Myers house and fixed it up, and which is a story that happens again and again in our community. We go into neighborhoods and fix them up, and you know, it becomes a stereotype, but it's the truth. So I kind of dug it, but I know that they're very controversial. I thought that there are people in the gay community who hated them, and thought it was the worst kind of stereotypes, and others who adored them. And I think I was kind of in that latter camp. I dug the Johns. So.
Yeah, but they also did try. You know, they put them in the Myers house. The reason that they were murdered wasn't because they were gay or disposable. It was because they live. Too bad in the Myers house. They probably took one look at this was Michael Myers' house, and they were like, I don't care. Like, that's the dumb thing. I will buy it for cheap now. Like, so I could definitely see that.
Oh yeah.
And so it made me more like,
I could see their history. Exactly, Lindsay. I could see them deciding to purchase the house. I could see all that backstory, even though it wasn't presented. So I totally agree with you. I like them. So.
Well, you know what part of it is too is if, like, let's face it. I mean, if it's a character in a horror movie, period. I mean, you can't really take the fact of them being killed personally. I mean, most people do, you know, die in the horror movie.
Yeah. So, we're kind of ending.
You know what horror movie I saw recently that I really see? This kind of like sometimes these quiet horror movies that are sort of for us people in our later years. I watched this movie with Barbara Hershey called The Manor.
Yes.
That was just about the seniors' home.
Yep, I saw it.
Which, you know, is ripe territory.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because that, and so I really sort of found, I enjoyed that a lot.
Nice.
And I always like.
And that's exactly what I was going to ask you. Like, as wrapping things up, so you hit it right on the head. And I remember seeing that, and I think they do. They deal with, there's a little flirtation, romance. I mean, they haven't stopped having sex. There's that kind of subplot with Barbara Hershey and Bruce Davison, you know, almost getting it on, kind of, so
Yeah.
it kind of, and definitely presents that, people are there for various reasons. Barbara Hershey's character is so obviously gorgeous and active.
She is gorgeous. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at pictures. Holy crap.
Yeah. But she's got a disease that's going to like kind of take away her capabilities. So that's why she goes there. And I think there are many different reasons why people end up in the Manor. And I think I agree, Owen. I think it did a really nice job.
You want to, something? I have been a fan of Barbara Hershey's since. This is like one of my favorite Hollywood stories. So I think she was living with David Carradine at the time, and they were on the beach in Malibu, and they're walking down the beach, and she felt the soul of a seagull, meld with her or something, and then for like the next 3 years, she was Barbara Hershey Seagull. And I was just like, I kind of dig that. I loved that sort of, very I'm just on the beach. And you know what I mean? I like the vibe.
Yeah. See,
I'm a fan for life after that.
That's awesome. Well, I guess
I had no idea. That's amazing.
You're speaking with David Carradine. That David Carradine cock is just going to take to some interesting places. It took her to the.
I'm sure she even said it to him. Like, she was like, I feel like that seagull just went into me. And David Carradine was like, it did. Absolutely. Like, she had a guy that, like, she was literally walking with the guy that would have agreed with her, right? Like, that's hilarious.
Yeah. They were in Boxcar Bertha together, correct?
Yeah.
The Roger Corman. Yeah. That's how they met. Wow.
Corman.
I love that. I don't know if I knew that. But now we do.
I hope that story is true. I've been carrying it around. I don't know why it came up tonight for probably 40 years.
I'm not even going to Google it. I'm not even going to check.
Yeah, no. I think we should have pride and faith in the fact that story is true. Just as we have so much pride and happiness that you've been here, Owen. Tell us where people can, shout out the Instagram pages and the different things for the Belmont Box, just so people can know and follow them.
Sure. My Instagram page is my name, Owen Keehnen, OwenKeehnen, and the Facebook page for the Belmont Rocks is A Place for Us, LGBTQ Life at the Belmont Rocks.
Awesome. And your books are on Amazon, correct? Like Doorway into Darkness and The Dugan's Bistro. And perfect.
Also, I'd like to shout out to the Gerber Hart Library and Archives. Every single Tuesday they do a Tillie Tuesday, and you can look at pictures of Tillie.
Nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah, when you were talking about her, I was looking her up and I was like, whoa, Gerber Hart's got a crap ton of pictures of her. So that too.
I want to know, that's one of the things I didn't bring up when we mentioned Tillie, is that Tillie has like all these boxes at Gerber Hart and has more pictures of like professional pictures of herself than I've ever seen. It's like crazy how many there are.
Yeah, this is wonderful. But yeah, follow Gerber Hart's Instagram because it's got it all.
Yeah. Yes, Gerber Hart's great.
That's awesome. I love it. I'll have to get down there. And don't be silly, but definitely be Tillie. I think that's the. Oh
my God! Thank you so much, Owen. This has been so wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yay!
Happy Pride, everyone.
Happy Pride!